Welcome to another video from English Matters, and today I want to talk about simile, metaphor and personification used in Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Now, of course, one of the features of 19th century writing is it tends to be very dense, which in many ways is quite a good thing. There's a lot to extract and a lot to talk about. Now, often we talk about imagery. Now, imagery tends to be created by the use of figurative language. The following devices I've just mentioned: metaphor, simile, personification. So I thought I'd pluck out a few interesting ones from A Christmas Carol. Now, certainly one that features very early in Stave 1 is a description of Scrooge as solitary as an oyster. It's wonderful because it gives the impression of Scrooge having a hard exterior and being shut off from the world, which of course he is, but it also suggests that there might be some good in him, shut away like a pearl, something at the centre of him that is worthy of reformation, which of course is what the story is about. It is an essential simile as it suggests that Scrooge can be reached. Like an oyster can be prized open and reformed, at the end of the novella we are told how his heart laughed. The heart is kind of like the pearl here. Another metaphor, of course, which I like is in his dismal little cell. It's obviously comes from Stave 1 again. And it's a reference to Bob Cratchit at work, suggesting that his work environment is like a prison and his work is just endless drudgery. I mean, remember, prisoners in the 19th century would have been put to work really on the treadmill and things like that. It's an effective metaphor, really, as it illustrates the world that Scrooge inhabits and forces upon others. His room is also described as dusty chambers by Fred, which perfectly illustrates that Scrooge's world represents decay and effectively an absence of life. Personification, one of my favourites from Stave 3, of course, it's the Ghost of Christmas Present, takes him through sort of the contemporary London. The slow potatoes knocked loudly at the saucepan lid. The Cratchit's house is bustling with energy and excitement on Christmas Day, despite being poor. So the use of personification here adds to the overall tone of excitement and anticipation. Excuse me. Dickens often derives a lot of humour from the descriptions of food and eating. It's something he takes a lot of comedic value from. He uses personification to add to the excitement and humour of many passages. I mean, for example, you consider the description of the London market stalls, full of festivity and life, where the French plums blushed in modest tartness from their highly decorated boxes. But there are countless examples of food or rituals around eating that Dickens finds very amusing throughout his novels, in fact. Dickens here perfectly illustrates, I think, the spirit of Christmas and the joy it brings to families, even ones as desperate and as poor as the Cratchits. So in this passage, the Ghost of Christmas Present uses the Cratchits as exemplars of the Christmas season and turns Scrooge's early misguided and misanthropic sentiments against him, like famously, if he's going to die, let him do so, and decrease the surplus population and things like that. Personification, Stave 3. There were great round pot-bellied baskets of chestnuts shaped like the waistcoats of jolly old gentlemen. You know, it depicts a lively experience of a Christmas market where everything is imbued and animated. Even inanimate objects are animated with the Christmas spirit. And it's another example of Dickens using humour to describe the inner life of inanimate objects. His writing has a very fairy tale quality to it, and very sort of grotesque elements, even very dark grotesque elements. But certainly a fairy tale aesthetic, fairy tale quality to it. I think one critic, I think it was Dorothy Van Gent, said that the Dickens world is ultimately nervous because everything is kind of alive and vibrant. So the inner life of inanimate objects, it thematically links into the magic metaphor. The younger Cratchits were steeped in sage and onion to the eyebrow. This idea of being buried in something, there's this idea of there being so much of something. When, you know, ironically, of course, the Cratchits are very poor. This metaphor, of course, the children being buried, perfectly encapsulates the joy and the experience of the Cratchit household. It's the use of hyperbole here. It's poignant as we doubt there is that much food in the Cratchit household. But what it does is it reveals to us the inner excitement and sense of joy in the hearts of all the children. It's almost recounting the scene from the perspective of the children themselves in some respects. Dickens takes us into the world to reveal an atmosphere of innocent joy and celebration, perfectly epitomised by the Cratchits themselves, where the evils of the world, so facilitated by Scrooge and his type, bear fruit in the tragic sort of pathos of the figure represented by Tiny Tim. Obviously, Scrooge's worldview, we see the victims of his worldview in terms of the figure of Tiny Tim, of course, as well as want and ignorance personified in Stave 3, I think it is. Metaphor Stave 4. Tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone. Of course, Scrooge is faced with his own headstone here and his own death. The metaphor is poignant as it reveals Scrooge's desire to change. His reformation is complete, bringing our kind of morality tale to an end. It is a kind of a morality tale, really, in many respects. Certainly interesting use of the word stone here. Remember, Scrooge at the beginning is described as being as hard as flint. The simile is poignant as it reveals the impenetrable exterior he has cultivated over many years. Remember, though, also, of course, you must remember the image of the oyster as well. Stave 5, metaphor. He was a second father. Scrooge's reformation is represented in the metaphor of the father of family, something he had rejected before. It also has sort of semi-religious connotations, as the word father conjures up images of God the Father, the Christian spirit, but also the nurturing a warmth embodied within this particular metaphor is quite poignant here and perfectly illustrates Scrooge's complete reformation. Similarly, Stave 1, as hard and as sharp as flint. Again, another very physical, tactile image beautifully represents the characters of Scrooge, the man bereft of any humanity. Again, an interesting simile which conveys Scrooge's reprehensible and twisted nature from the outset, a character that Dickens enjoys deconstructing, revealing how each impenetrable layer of his personality was formed effectively due to the traumas of his childhood, which was shown by the ghost of Christmas past. Anyway, this is an example of how you can interpret sort of imagery used by Dickens in A Christmas Carol, so the use of metaphor, simile and personification, how thematically it's linked. And it's important that you comment upon these things in your response to this novel, or novella, I should say. Because that's where your marks are obtained, not merely labelling things, but talking about the effect and why this particular language device has been used. Anyway, you've been watching an episode of English Matters. Do please share, click, like, subscribe, do all of the above. But most important, please do keep studying.